give her a plug when I can. Are you ready? Because I was waiting for you. Oh, you got your own microphone even. All right.
There we go. All right. Well, hi. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I know we're doing this right after lunch, which means at some point if I see people nodding off, we're just going to get up and we're going to stretch. All right? We'll see how that works. Well, anyway, my name is Rob Taylor, and I'm the general manager of the Bridge Radio in New Jersey and in New York. And I really appreciate Pastor Ron giving me this opportunity to share what we've learned about underwriting sponsorship. I should start off by saying, and it's been interesting in some of the sessions, people have kind of thrown stuff my way, and it's humbling for me. I don't expect that, but it's nice. We do prayer every morning. If you're not doing that at your stations, you need to. Every single morning, we open up in prayer. And a lot of times, we pray about things that we need to do at the radio station, what's happening. It's not just a task list, but it's what meetings that we have, who we're meeting with. We have a big project, as you know, going on in New York. So it's very common to be praying about Verizon and the stuff that we're putting in, the fiber optics, things of that nature. And when it comes to underwriting, it's no different. If we're going to have a meeting with a potential sponsor, it's done in prayer. So I don't need this. I don't want to preach to the choir, but everything we've done is through prayer, and I take that very seriously. And during prayer, and this is kind of where we're going to lead into the session, one of the questions, and even when I'm alone, I ask the Lord, who am I? Who am I to be doing this? Who am I to be here today even talking about this? I don't forget that, and I take that very seriously. Who am I to be called upon in any of these sessions? Why, Lord, why did you appoint me to do this? But it's very humbling. And, if you talk about who I am, I've worked in radio for over 30 years now, and being a Christian in secular radio is a tough position to be in. It's really, but at the same time, the Lord has you there as a light in the office. And I had many opportunities through the years to tell people about Jesus, and people say, I want what you have. But I've also was afforded the opportunity to learn a lot of things that we get to use today. And part of that was sales and underwriting. For what it's worth, I have certifications from the Radio Advertising Bureau in sales. So it's meeting with clients, it's digital sales, it's a lot. And if you ever have an interest in taking any of that training from the Radio Advertising Bureau, while some of it does not apply to what we do, a lot of it is about interaction and just working with people. And I will say, our negotiations, even for New York City, while that's not necessarily what we're talking about today, a lot of what we're going to talk about today came into that. There's a lot of things that go on. Even if you have pastors that want to come onto the station, even that's not exactly underwriting, that same process is what we're going to cover today. So I'm just grateful for that opportunity working in secular radio and seeing what the challenges are, and then saying, how do we relate this to what we do as we move into Christian radio? Fortunately for me, I had the opportunity to work for a couple ministries before the Bridge. So I knew what was going on as far as the differences with Christian audiences, underwriting. I also had the opportunity to work in public radio, which again is non-commercial radio, similar to what we do, and work for a college as well at their radio station. Gave this a lot of thought, a lot of prayer, putting this presentation together. So I'm going to start off by saying, if you don't have a pen, get yourself a pen. If you have to get a pen and get it together, I purposely left your sheet blank because I want you to write stuff in. And it's not to make it difficult. It's more for you to kind of interpret, how does this apply to your station? I'm often faced with, well, you guys are in New York, you're in New Jersey, I'm a small low power FM. And let me just say first off, when I put this together, I call it Underwriting Sponsorship 101. It is 101. So even coming to the Bridge, a lot of the stuff that I know, you have to leave that stuff at the door. How do we, it's basically what we do is very interesting. How do we compete, and we are competing, with regular radio, and then how do we then make it non-commercial? How do we make it for our communities? And then how do we do it under Calvary Chapel and what we do without compromising? And I always call it's almost like 3 steps removed, but how do we still maintain integrity in what we do it well, but not use the excuse that we're going to do it second rate because of who we are. But don't compromise in what we do, Okay, so that's what this is about. So that's my introduction. So let's start off with the first thing. The first statement here is what underwriting sponsorship is. Now, well, that's a simple question. Well, for us, it's probably a little bit different than it is for you, or maybe not. I should say that we have gotten involved with fundraising. When I first came to the Bridge, there were a lot of people who donated a lot of money to the radio station, but we never responded to them in any way. So we started a formal fundraising program. Now, I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole separate conversation. But one of the things we did with fundraising is that we looked at who were the major donors. And major donors are usually two sets of people. They're either businesses, and I'm talking about now, this is somebody who's already donating to your station. So they're either businesses or they're people who have been blessed and own businesses. And most times when you see a rather large donation coming through, if you do your homework, you'll find out it's somebody that owns a business. So we call that major donor support. So what do we mean by that? What we did with our sponsorship is we did something a little different. We have an audio announcement. It's a short little billboard that runs, and it says, "Teaming with you." And it just starts off, and it says, "The Bridge teaming with you, thanks to these people who support the Bridge just like you." Just like you, meaning the audience. So the audience supports the Bridge, and so do these underwriters. We don't use the word underwriting on the air. But what they are is they're about 15 to 18-second announcements that talk about the businesses. And what essentially these announcements are doing is they thank the businesses for sponsoring and partnering with us. That simple. We call that major donor support because really what we're doing is we're telling these businesses, thank you for supporting us. So it's a mention. And that's why I ask, what is underwriting sponsorship? What is it? It's acknowledgement. It's actually part of a bigger program. We say, okay, wait a minute, I don't have this sponsorship program. I don't have it set up that way. Well, you can. You can. Which moves to our second point. What it isn't. What is underwriting sponsorship isn't? It isn't advertising. I'll repeat that. It isn't advertising. It isn't advertising for a lot of reasons. It isn't advertising because of the IRS. We have to be very careful. It isn't advertising because of the fact that if you're non-commercial or low-power FM, it cannot be advertising. You shouldn't even discuss it as advertising. In fact, in advertising, if someone has a business and it's advertising, they're expecting to get some type of receipt that they can use to write off the advertising. It's a donation, but it's not advertising, which goes back to what I said. It's major donor support. This is important because I'll say that to you, it's not advertising. And let me tell you, I've noticed time after time, you get into those conversations with somebody who has a business that wants to support you, and immediately it will either infer or the conversation will move to advertising. It'll be forgotten. Or if you sit and you have a conversation with them, we're talking about underwriting support, what it is that you're supporting the radio station, and that the monies that you give helps change lives of other people that listen to the radio station. Notice I didn't say the monies you give helps us build a new antenna, helps us buy a piece of equipment. We don't say that stuff. We say it helps us change lives, which is true. Isn't that why we're in this business? We're in the business of changing lives. So your support changes lives, essentially. Very quickly, those conversations become, well, if I advertise and, nope, you're not advertising. Well, if I put support on for my pizza shop, how many more people are going to walk through the door of my pizza shop? None. What do you mean none? That's not what this is. It isn't ROI. It is not return on investment in the traditional sense. We're not bringing people in to your business. And I'm going to say this over and over. Maybe it makes sense to you, but when you get into the conversations with somebody that's supporting and they write that check every month, that donation, sometimes they forget. And you'll say, hey, I've been on the air for 3 months. We really didn't see any kind of increase in business. You're not. And when I say that to you, those are the exact words that we tell them very nicely, not nasty. You say, you're not. Remember, we had our original conversation. Oh, yeah, that's right. And 2 months later, rinse, repeat. Hey, Rob, I've had this on the air for 5 months with you guys now. I haven't gotten one, a mortgage broker. I haven't seen one guy come. You won't. Oh, well, I have to explain it to people above me. Okay, well, if this is not working out, then we need to close the door. I mean, sometimes you need to say goodbye to things. But know that going in. Okay, so it's not ROI. It's not advertising. it's going to be forgotten. It's going to come up over and over. So point number one, it's major donor support, if you want to call it that from a fundraising point of view. It's people who are getting acknowledgement. Point number two is it's not advertising. There's no return on investment. Of course, the return on investment is you're changing lives, but that is an intangible. It's not measurable, and that's very important. You'll find that as you start soliciting, even if you put on-air announcements that you can sponsor the station, probably the two biggest categories you're going to hear from are real estate agents, and you're probably going to hear from financial investment, or even some of these guys with these pyramid schemes, which you have to be careful of. What are they looking for? They're looking for leads. And again, that's ROI. So you have to be very clear. And when you tell them, especially the financial people, when you tell them, this is not for you, you're not going to see a bunch of leads, they will magically go away. And if you tell them, even in your meetings, your personal meetings with them, that there is no return on investment, they will still hesitate and believe that, well, they're going to know better. But you have to really reinforce that. And you will see when most people will say, I don't want that. But when it comes time to sign and you say there is no return on investment, they will not sign, which is fine. You don't want that. We deliver on what we promise. We broadcast the truth. We tell the truth. And all of this is done in truth. Non-commercial stations are among the most difficult to sell. And here's the reasons why. Now remember, I said for this presentation, I considered everyone that's in this room. I considered your situation. We have some of the same situations with our translators. The first reason is coverage area. Your coverage area is not going to be the same as a commercial station. For us at the Bridge, we don't cover the same amount of territory as the New York City radio stations cover. We just don't. That's the number one thing I get from people. They're very spoiled. The same thing applies here in Myrtle Beach, and Pastor Ron knows that. He's nodding right now. He knows when you put on a main station, you can drive and drive and drive, and it comes in. But your station, not so much. And we have the same thing. You drive, in some cases you drive maybe 50 minutes and we're gone. New York City, they're very used to driving. You can drive an hour and a half through that entire signal, not hear a bit of static. So again, for users of radio, listeners, they're not used to that small coverage area. So what does that got to do with sponsors? Well, your sponsors are also listeners. So many times they'll say, I don't get your signal that well. I say, well, that's part of the difference between us and a big station. So know that going in. I mean, there are challenges. Your targeted audience is different. We have stations that are major stations. They're looking at mass numbers of audiences. So if it's a sports station, a news station, country, I don't care what the format is. These are major formats. Even contemporary Christian is a major format. What we do is different. We're a targeted audience. So again, it's going to be a smaller audience. This goes back to point number two. There's not going to be a return on investment because you're not hitting mass numbers of people. You're hitting a very defined group. It's not a bad thing. It is what it is. In some cases, you have technical issues. And that's okay. You should avoid them, but you have issues where it's automation, no one's there, you have dead air, you're off the air, the fidelity isn't as good. I mean, those are things that you need to address, you should address. Again, Pastor and I were talking about the audio fidelity on the radio station here in town. When I got the rental car, I'm dialing through, and quite honestly, he was playing music. I didn't even know it was him. I turned it on. I said, wow, these guys are great. They sound great. And I listened to the lyrics. I said, oh, it's a Christian station. And I realized it was from here. And that was surprising because usually we're known as the stations that are the lowest volume on the dial. That makes a difference. So just know that there's those technical issues when someone is considering for sponsorship, if they hear anything that doesn't sound like what their expectation of a commercial radio station is, that's going to hinder the process. Well, yeah, I put you guys on. It doesn't really come in that good. Now, that could be full signal. It's not as loud on the dial. That makes a difference. We try to avoid that. But again, if you don't have the resources to put the audio processing equipment in, I suggest you research that and see if there's ways around it. It is what it is. So again, these are some of the difficulties that you should know. So again, going over to your coverage area, your targeted audience, if there's any technical issues, you have dead air, if you have automation that doesn't seem to work. I mean, I love Pastor Ron's thing about the backup. I was thinking about, what do we do for redundancy? That's very important. You don't want to be off the air. You don't want to have that reputation and say, well, that's the station that's run by the church down the street. You don't want to be known as that. You want to be equally as someone puts it on and says, okay, I want my teaching, I go here. I want my news, I go there. It's okay to be second rate. And that's important because when you go out and ask for support, you want to have the respect of the businesses in the area. In some cases, some of that stuff is out of your control. So the who and where to find supporters. So how do we find these people? Who are they? Well, we'll call that your leads. Who could possibly be a supporter? Sometimes they call the radio station. Someone has it on their heart to call. It could be somebody that's in the church on Sunday that walks up to the senior pastor and says, I want to support the radio station. That's very common. That's all good. It could be church members who are business owners, people that you know have businesses but necessarily have not approached you. Maybe you need to start that conversation. Is that conversation a Sunday conversation? I would say probably not. It's a conversation on Sunday. Hey, I want to call you during the week. What's a good time? Someone owns a restaurant. You think it's a pretty good restaurant. You don't want to call them and set an appointment at lunchtime. So again, what is their business? What do they do? If it's a car dealer, do you really want to be there on the weekend to meet with them? So I would start that conversation maybe at the end of service, or at least say, hey, I want to get together with you. It's a phone call. Other ministries, and this is tough. Other ministries can be on your list, but here's when it gets kind of tough, and we're very particular about this. And I won't compromise in any way. Other ministries are great. You start getting into the doctrinal issues. What do they believe? We have a statement of faith that they all sign, but we check them out. A lot of times, other ministries will contact the radio station. They want to be on for an event that they're having. That event I'll define an event. An event can be if they're having a movie night. It could be something with the women's group is having a speaker. We have to see who the speaker is. Does the speaker line up with what we believe? Is there a doctrinal issue with the person? If there is, that's not going to make it on the air. It could be a concert. Who's the concert? Who is it? Is it a group that we normally would not play? And I'm not saying because of texture, meaning it's hard rock. It's more about, what does that group believe? Is it someone who kind of that you're going to hear when you go to Coles, and it's they're kind of secular, but they kind of cross over into Christian. I don't know if that's a good fit. We've turned away things, and sometimes things slip through the cracks, and when they do, we hear about it. The listeners will be the first one to call us and say, that event you're supporting isn't exactly fit what we do. There is something I just want to take a break here and ask. I wanted this to be very interactive, so if there's any questions along the way, please raise hands. I want to make sure that we're answering questions as we go. I don't want to be up here talking the whole time. So if you have like a story or a question or something about, please ask. But other times in ministry, you have a question, sir? Yeah, I'm sorry.
I have a statement.
Yes.
You talk about where we find these supporters.
Sorry, Bruce.
Right. Yeah, they want it to be heard, I guess.
We have a unique situation in our station where we're right down below prisoners from Hawaii.
Right.
And so we have Hawaiian ministers coming in that we've never seen or heard of. And so that's something that we want to check out very closely.
Absolutely. Everything that airs, whether it's a program that's on the air or or some kind of sponsorship, I agree. You have other ministries. We have one that we're talking to in the city of Paterson, New Jersey. If you know anything about Paterson, it's a very tough area. But they, interestingly enough, do a lot of great stuff in the community. So we started those conversations. Well, it turns out they're training the executive director. He's a Calvary Chapel pastor, which changes the entire conversation because we know what they believe and what they do. But again, that's where we luck out. There's other organizations where you have to be extremely careful. And that's my suggestion to you. Other ministries can be a great resource. They can also be they can be very dangerous. So it may sound great. Oh, we're all Christians. You need to check them out. You need to vet them. Local events that are going on in the area. Now, sometimes the local events could even be a blood drive. It could be something that the local police are doing in town. It could be a town fair. It could be town days. That's something we've gotten very involved with is town days. We have different zones where we are. I call them different zones. We're in the central part of New Jersey, and then we're in northern New Jersey, and then we're in southern New York State and the Hudson Valley of New York. Southern New York State also covers Pennsylvania. So we've gotten involved with the town days. So we'll drive 2.5 hours to where one of our signals and get involved with the town days. That is something that you can promote. It can be something we do for maybe a trade or they get some money on the air. So again, it's case by case. And then
Quick question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So specifically, what do you do at town days?
Town days. You see a table in the back? Mm-hmm. We set up a table like that. We put some games on the table, depending on how big it is. We have a football you throw through, and you just spread the word about the radio station. And many people will come up and say, "Oh, I never heard of this radio station," or they have. So you either get wonderful feedback from people who are already listeners of the station, and they're very happy to see you in the community. It's almost like a script. They'll come up and say, "Hey, it's so good. I listened to you guys for years. Never seen you in my neighborhood. It's so good that you're part of the community." You get that. It's like a script they read to you. It's so funny. Or you get new people who've never heard of the radio station. And you get people who don't believe there's even God, and it's a great chance to minister to them and witness to them about the Lord. And I know it sounds great, right? But we've had situations where We've had people who've come out and they ask for my name, they ask for my card, I give it, and maybe 3-4 weeks later they say, listen to your radio station, I didn't know Jesus loved me so much, and they come to the Lord. And at the end of the day, isn't that why we're all here? And why? Because we came out to an event that maybe was a sponsored event. So it all works together. It's just being discerning about what it is. We try to stay away from events where they're serving alcohol, but there's another thought about that. Maybe we need to be there where they're serving alcohol too, right? You know, we were at an event where I think they had a beer tent, and it was kind of interesting. I was with a pastor from another Calvary chapel. He partnered next to us in North Jersey, and he goes, I want to be next to that beer tent next week when we do this. So I was like, yeah. He goes, we got to be there. Those are the guys that need to. And he's right. He's absolutely right. It's nice to hear from the people that listen to us. That's great. But we got to spread the word. So you've probably heard the word packages. Let me define packages. What that means. Does everyone know what I mean when I say package? Okay. So in advertising, you come up with, and I use the word advertising, a list of what your rates are. And of course, it's like you're ordering. I always say it's like ordering parts. How many would you like? Well, I'd like 5 announcements. Well, that'll cost you whatever, $20. If you'd like 10, we'll give you a special. We'll do it for $35. If you'd like, it becomes a list. Packages are, during the month of September, we have a special deal. Sign up for $100, and we'll put you on at packages. Packages come from really where advertising agencies are asking what your rates are. We don't really do packages. We have a form. I didn't bring it because we don't really do them, and I'll explain why. If we put a list, and we have a list, there is a sheet that has the packages, and it has what the monthly rate is, and it starts off at $100. And the next rate is $200. You can guess it's $300, $400, and $500. I bet you all can guess when you present that sheet to somebody, guess which option they take? 100, every time. We ran into a situation when I first joined the radio station where I asked, why are all our sponsorships at $100 a month? And the response I got from the person was, well, that's all they can afford. And I said, we have 50 sponsors on the air. Every single one of these people can only afford $100. I mean, if a couple people were at $50, I'd feel better about it. It's just magically everybody's at $100. Okay? This is true. Well, that's all they're going to do. Which leads me to something I want to say, and this is something in life. Never answer for the client. Never, ever. If you're negotiating a tower lease, you're doing something. You're talking to John Sims in the back of the room about a piece of equipment. You do not answer. Well, John's going to want a lot of money for that if I call him. Ask John how much it is. Ask if he could do something with the price. I mean, For you, Rob. Well, yeah, but really, I mean, I use him as, sorry, John, I don't mean to make an example, but, never assume that all they can do is $100. Just don't assume that. So we don't really do the preset packages. We have them, and you'll see why this comes in at a later time. Now we get into the next thing here, where it's all about them. It's not about us. I call that the servant model. Do you have a question, sir? Yes? Hold on a second. I just want to make sure they get the mic, because I guess they're listening online or something, or they're viewing.
Real quick question
Yes,
about
sir.
the packages.
Yeah.
Do you guys do any kind of a quote-unquote contract with people, or is it just,
That's a good
hey,
question.
you pay, we give your spot, and if you don't pay, we don't?
Excellent question. So we do have an agreement. We do. We have an agreement. It's very simple. It outlines really what they're purchasing, so that there's an agreement there. What it is, again, like I mentioned, and as you see this presentation builds, what are they doing? They're getting mentions on the air. We're thanking them for their support, but we're going to write down how many times are we going to do this. So there is an agreement. If you pay $400 a month, we guarantee a minimum of whatever it is, 25. But then we put plus bonuses, which means we're going to run it more than 25 times. The key to this is not to say, well, they only paid for 25. I'm not going to give them 26. You want them to hear it. You want other people to hear it. It's just that we say it's a minimum of what it is, but that's in writing. There's a statement of faith that they have to sign, and that's part of the package deal. Not the package, it's part of the paperwork package, not the outline. Don't confuse the two. Does that make sense what I'm saying? But we bonus these people like crazy. I mean, we do that purpose. Not that we don't have enough time to fill. We have a lot of sponsors. It's just that you want them to hear themselves. You want people to hear this. It's not.
How do you deal with day parts?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, the question is, how do you deal with day parts? In other words, it's dealt with two ways. In other words, day parts meaning the most amount of number one location for listenership is in the car. So the most amount of listenership in order is going to be mornings, afternoons, and guess what? Weekends, because they're in the car. So the question is, how do you deal with day parts? So of course, if anybody knows how to buy radio, I said buy radio, they're going to know they want to be on in the morning or the afternoon. And everybody wants to be on in the morning if they're savvy. We don't put somebody that doesn't know about radio, we don't do that. Well, they didn't know, they didn't ask for mornings. We still put them on in the mornings. We want people to hear it. Some people are insistent that they're on in the morning, so we put them on in the morning or they're on in the afternoon. So we do day part. We won't bonus in those times, but we will help. A local Italian restaurant opened up. They attend Calvary Chapel, Old Bridge, and they've attended for many years. They had a catering business. They took over a pizza place that went out of business in a really good spot, and people thought the place was closed. So they came on. I don't even know what they're paying. It's not much. But we said, we knew about, remember I said no ROI, remember? No ROI. So this guy, I'm like, yeah, but you're not going to get the word out there. I know, I just want to bless the bridge. I'm like, yeah, but you really want people to come in and buy your pizza is what you want. Yeah. Remember I said the conversation gets forgotten. They go, yeah, I'm like, no, I don't think this is right for you. No, I want to do it. I said, okay. So what did we do? We kind of put it on a little bit more in drive time so that there was awareness. And the whole point was just to know that the place existed. And did that work? Well, it worked because the body heard it and the people from the church and the fellowship went over there. So he did see a little traction, but we guaranteed no ROI. So again, if they're looking for morning drive, how are you going to do the ROI thing? You don't. There's no return on investment. This is great. I love the questions, by the way, because this is what I wanted.
If this question will come up later or even not in this session, that's fine. When I tried to draw up or write up an agreement and I submitted it to one of the kind of like councils we have there at the church, somebody who's financially savvy, and she used to work in banks and stuff. She said she couldn't reconcile, and then I'm not speaking poor of her, but she confused me. But she couldn't reconcile how this is not an advertisement or a purchase for ROI,
Correct.
but I have to have her review this agreement, and I have to have an agreement, and I'm guaranteeing them a certain number of mentions. She couldn't put that together.
She makes a valid point. We had the same conversation. It's the best way the best thing you can say is this is no different than if you watch your local PBS station, and if you want to purchase something, you make a donation of so much, you get this much. That's all it is. It's really you're making a donation. Instead of giving them a book or a CD or a video or whatever it is, you're giving them mentions. That's all it is. It's just for paperwork purposes. It's very hard to enforce this if they don't pay. And we have those conversations. We have it. I go, well, this guy's 3 months late. All right, well, late on his donation, and it gets iffy. So you kind of you call up and say, hey, if you don't want to support us anymore, that's fine. But we're just letting you know we're going to take it off the air. Which leads to the other question. Do you get the payment in advance or do you get it afterwards? I like to get it in advance if you can, but sometimes it comes afterwards. It's not business. So unfortunately, this is something that brings revenue into your radio station, but at the same time, it's a business side of what we do, but at the same time, you can't treat it as much as business. I don't know if that's answering your question. You need the agreement, but it's more, and if you could make it looser, that makes sense. Make it not as tight. I think we have questions all over here. This is good stuff. I love it.
Do you do all of the recordings?
Oh, good question.
That's only part A.
Can I hold it? Can I hold the question?
If you're covering it later,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
then are you also covering later specifically what we cannot say or what we can say?
Very little, because I promised Scott I wouldn't.
Well, you can. But
I'm going to cover it like this much. He's going to cover that tomorrow.
Perfect. That's fine.
Very little.
this afternoon, actually.
Oh, it's this afternoon. I'm sorry. This afternoon. Okay. Very little.
Okay, so sometimes I get competing sponsors. Like, say they're both realtors.
Yep.
Will you do that?
Absolutely.
You won't do an exclusive.
Absolutely. Everybody and anyone, we don't put them in the same spot. There's a block. We won't put them, we'll space them out.
Okay, 2,
Good question.
how long is your contract? Month to month? That's what we do.
I hesitate because it's case by case. There's no expiration date is what we do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
There's no expiration date. We got rid of all the expiration dates. The biggest problem we have are expiration dates because when I walked in, this was treated like advertising. The person who, bless him, the guy who put this together originally, he came from the advertising specialties business. You know the pens that you write your name on? He did that. He got it. And for advertising, for a program when you come into and there's nothing there, he did a great job. Problem is he put end dates and everything. He treated it like what you said. He's treating it like advertising. And when you go back to somebody and you say to them, you either get one of two things. You go, actually get three answers. Oh, your sponsorship's coming up for renewal. My what? Oh, that's that $100 I send every month. They had no idea what it was. Or two, we're not seeing any ROI. I want to cancel that. Or three, well, just keep going with it until I tell you to stop. So we said, these are all wrong answers. None of these were good answers, really.
One last question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so what we're doing, and you tell me if you think this is good or bad, because we're new. We've only been on the air like 5 months.
That's great.
We do our sponsors from 6 in the morning till 9 at night, and they are on a random rotation chosen by the computer. So that way we don't guarantee you're next to Pastor Chuck Smith. Do you think that's a cool thing?
I think that's
to
great.
rotate?
We call that run of station, ROS. We do it a lot. It just means it randomly comes up. The only challenge you're going to have is if you have two of the same, they might come back to back. If it's
Yeah,
two
could
categories,
happen.
that's the only. But I have no problem with that. We do that a lot. That's great. The only time we don't do that is back to your question about day parts. Somebody wants to be in the morning, and a lot of times what we do is we let the computer schedule it all. We go through a software, we actually use natural log, and then when they go in and we hand insert it and make sure we make a note that these guys have to come. So we'll put whatever the computer places in there, we pull it out, and randomly, it's a mouse click, you put it in. It's a few minutes, but the person's doing the logs does it. Yes,
Now,
sir.
Rob, you were saying you guys don't have rate cards. So
Right.
I see you have a section here of open-ended questions when you're
Oh, sure.
meeting with the client.
I'll get
Is
to
that
it.
sort of how you begin to develop, well, this would probably work good for you,
You
and
got
this is
it.
what it would cost?
You got it. You're getting
Okay.
ahead of me. You got it. Good stuff. So why do I keep going? Because the questions are the very good questions. I love these questions. All right. So it's not about them. It's not about them. It's about them. Let me rephrase that. It's about them. It should always be about them. And I'm going to take a 15-second sidebar to say, even when dealing with listeners, even when announcing on the air, it's about them. It's about the audience. It's not about us. Any of your promos for the station is about them. How does this radio station serve the audience? How does it serve? And it uses singular. We talked about this before in one of the sessions with Rob Branch. You is the most important word. So you're not speaking to a group, it's you. So when you're meeting with a potential client, it's all about them. You are on a fact-finding mission about them. You'll have a chance to talk about the radio station. If you come in and say, my station does this, my station's great, we do this, we did that, we have 25 stations, we have this, we have that, we've been on the air since, they don't care. And I said this earlier. You care very much about this. We're all in the radio business. We care about this. This is what we love. We love what we're doing. We have a radio station. This is a part of people's days. And you have to remember, for a listener, it's a part of their day. These people who are sponsors are also listeners. So we have to almost treat them the same way, where the radio station is part of their day. So you'll see by these questions, it's not all about the radio station for them. For you, it's all about the radio station. For them, they care, but not that much. And that's okay. That's just the way it is. So you have to know who your audience is. So we make this all about them. So you're meeting with a potential client. You don't say how great your station is or what we're offering them, this wonderful opportunity to be on. It's not the approach. It's about treating them as a partner, okay? And that's, if I had to make any other point here, that's very important. They are a partner to you. They are partnering with you. So let's find out more about them. We call this a client needs analysis, a CNA. It comes from the Radio Advertising Bureau. It's been changed quite a bit for this presentation and for what we do in Calvary Chapel Radio. It's not as if I'm trying to take something from a big commercial station and jam it into. You can't do a square peg into a round hole. We're not a square peg. We're not a round peg. We're kind of a triangle. We're kind of an octagon. We have to have our own DNA, right? So one of the questions you're going to ask, you want to find out about the business. You ask, how long you've been in business. These are just basic questions. There's no answer to this. You're just asking that question. Find out and it's not just to go through the routine. This is conversation. This is how, listen. Be a very good listener. How many locations do they have? Okay, where are they? Where are your locations? You should know that. And by the way, if you're going to be writing copy, Scott, I promise I won't go into detail. you're using this information. You know, if it's a chiropractor, been in business for 15 years with 2 locations. Guess where you got that information from? Your questions. So you're finding out about their business. So everything you're doing, if you notice, all of this is kind of, you have to know something I should share with all of you. I'm a very simple guy. People think I'm not. I'm extremely simple. I like things very simple. When it gets complicated, I like, Rob Branch gets into some of this stuff. I go, Rob, it's too much. I can't. It's too much. Simple. So this is very simple. We're asking very simple questions because later on, I'm going to use it. I have to write copy for this. So I'm going to use all this. I'm doing my homework, okay? Who's your customer? It's just good to know. Who's the customer? What's their age? What's their income level? And what you're looking at there is who attends your church? Who do you think listens to the radio station? It kind of, is it the same profile? It's a question, because that might be a question where maybe they don't fit, or maybe they do fit. This is all case by case. Everybody wants cookie cutter answers. Everybody wants the magic answers. There is no magic answers. There's no right answers. I hate to say it, it's case by case. Who are the competitors? So if it's a pizza place, does he have 5 competitors? What makes their business unique is what you're asking. What makes your business special and different? Okay. Are they currently advertising? Notice I put it in italics. There's that word, that ugly word, advertising. You need to speak to them in their terms, asking if they advertise. All right? And if so, what media are they on? Are they doing cable? Are they doing radio? Are they doing the coupons? Are they not doing? Why aren't they advertising? You need to know how savvy is this person with respect to media. Now, in commercial radio, that would be important because, okay, well, they buy it on, X105 and I'm Z103, and that's why that question is asked. For us, it's usually better if they're not doing advertising because they have really an expectation. Well, I advertise on the big news talk station and they charge me, $500 a commercial, but I'm telling you, it brings people in my business, and that's how this thing works. And I've been doing it for 10 years, and so your commercials better bring all this. And whoa, stop. Sometimes that's the worst client you can possibly deal with, because they just have had great success with commercial radio. Then they come and they want to advertise, and you tell them it's not advertising. They have a very hard time getting their head around the fact that there's a difference. So it's important to ask that question. What media are you in? Why or why not? And then here's the other big question. It's kind of coupled to the other one. Have you ever used radio? And if you have, what stations have you used it with? And what's been the results? And this is more to find out, what's their knowledge of radio. And this is not to bust into a conversation about, radio, how many watts you have and all that. It's just to get their understanding of what is their expectation of radio. What have they done in radio? Has radio been successful for them? What's the results look like? Some people are very tainted on radio. I'll tell you that right now. Some people will never advertise again. And a lot of times they've been promised things in radio that they didn't get from the commercial stations. So now, again, we come in and we say, we're not advertising, you're supporting. But in their head is, I gave money to a radio station in the past and I didn't get the results. So again, we're just trying to find out about them. If you notice, none of these questions really are about the radio station. Okay, and then you ask the question, what is your sponsorship? What do you want it to do? Now here comes that word sponsorship. You notice I put it in italics. What do you want your sponsorship to do? And say you're advertising. And usually you have 2 choices here, just as we start getting into the question you were asking before, Kim, is about, is it brand recognition? Is it educating consumers? Because that's all this is going to do. It's not going to bring people through the door per se. It's not going to be measurable. It's just to make awareness about their business, and it's thanking them. All right? So ask that question, what do you want it to do? And really, you want to see what, again, when you've had this conversation a little bit about it's not advertising, is it making sense? All right. Are we good so far? Any questions? Go ahead, please, guys. Raise the hands. This is interactive. You're not interrupting me. Go ahead and ask.
Okay, so say discrimination. What if you say, we only carry Christian sponsors or Christian-friendly businesses? Is there any kind of legal problems with that?
No, we've never had anything like that. That's your statement of faith. I mean, we have them sign a statement of faith that has, it's a very similar statement of faith that comes from Calvary Chapel, Old Bridge. It's what we believe in. The radio station believes the same thing. So they have to read that and sign off on it.
So your supporters are agreeing to your statement
Absolutely.
of faith. That's a great idea.
That will not go on the air without that. It will not. And I personally review each and every one of those. And if I don't see a signature, it doesn't go on the air. I don't care if it's paid. It does. It's the checks and balances. We have a checklist of everything that's needed, and it has to go through a couple different people where everything has to be there in case I miss something.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I did have one other question,
Sure.
and that is, we have a very small, very small, maybe 11 miles. And I love how you're talking about the fact that they are sponsoring it. You know, they're changing lives, because for us, I see that being a bigger part. You have a much bigger area, but do you find that you get sponsors outside? Because I'm marketing background, so you want people to hear it, but if they're not within my little circle, they're not going to hear it.
Two answers to that. It's an excellent question. The first part is, yes, they do come from outside. The biggest thing is that you need to meet with them. They're not, telemarketing to them, having somebody call and try to set appointments, it just does not work. It has to be some type of thing where you are looking and seeing the business or know about the business through some way. Like there's an exterminator called Bug Doctor, and he's Christian. He advertises it in a Christian magazine, but he does all the New York Yankees. He does Yankee Stadium. That's his big account. We know that he's a potential. So you would call him and say, I want to meet with you about possibly sponsoring the bridge. That's how you basically set that up. If you don't make the in-person visits, they're not going to really respond to it. Doing the email blast, so yes. Are they outside the area? Yes. We get some people who are outside the signal range, because there's an old story that talks about this car dealership, that the radio rep goes on the car dealership's lot and says, you want to advertise on Mix 105? And he says, why should I? Your station doesn't come into my lot. And the response is, do all your customers come from your lot? No. So if you are here and the signal doesn't come in, doesn't mean people won't patronize that business. Again, looking at ROI, but yes, you get people from outside the area. I should share very quickly that there are events that are outside of our 5 stations that we participate in, and we push the fact that we're on the app. And then, very interesting, about 2 or 3 months go by, we start seeing correspondence and donations from people who listen only on the app. So it does work. So going outside of your 11 miles, absolutely. Why not? I've even been in Bill's territory. I've been in his backyard. I have. Down in Sewell. They asked us to come down. And of course, if we don't come in there, I said, I don't care. So I got some listeners in Sewell. Is there another question? Yes.
Hey, Rob. So, all right. So this, the questions we're going through is basically the fact finding,
Yes,
trying
right.
to get to feel for them and what
Yep.
their perspective is. I noticed on here, there's nothing relating to faith. So do you get to that part of it later? Is that ahead
Yeah.
of this?
Oh, we're coming.
Okay, you're
It's
going to get to that.
coming.
Okay.
It's coming.
This is probably not a cold call, or could this be a cold call?
No, this is not going to be on a cold call, meaning you go in, you find out you go into the business, you walk in. Usually a cold call is going to be who makes the decisions about sponsorship. You make an introduction. You kind of say, I'd like to make an appointment to meet with the owner. It's going to be a very fast visit. This is
Right.
when you have the appointment set.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're not doing this on a first interaction. This is either an appointment that's set. But these are the questions that we ask.
All right. I don't want to get
And
ahead.
by the way, I want to say to you, you can refine these questions. You don't have to ask each one. These are examples. So this is a conversation.
Yeah.
And like any conversation, this is your script. And you might skip over something. If you know they have 5 locations, don't ask them. Or say, hey, I did some research. You guys have 5 locations? They go, yeah, we have a 6th one coming. So you don't have to do this word for word. Okay. So now you ask the next question is, have you ever purchased an underwriting sponsorship before? Probably you're going to get no. Sometimes they have, believe it or not, if they've done any kind of non-commercial radio, public radio, college radio. So you got to be prepared to now explain, this is where you get into the whole thing, the difference between advertising and sponsorship. And this is where you have to talk about, and this is, again, Scott, I'm not going to take away from your session, but they always want to talk about their big sale or why you should come into the business and these calls to action, and you need to start explaining that this is a donation. And there's some limitations to it, and it's not what you expect, and how you're changing lives. This is where that starts coming in. So this is where the faith comes in. I mean, name of our radio station is the Bridge Christian Radio. We've walked into, there was a jewelry store that was owned by an Indian family. And, they said, oh, we didn't realize you were Christian. And it's like, well, it's right on the business card. I mean, but people don't look that, They said, okay, fine. They got it. Interestingly enough, they called us about a year later, and they've been saved. and they want to come on. So you wonder what started that conversation. So you got to be careful, but again, you don't say you didn't read the business card. We go, that was a little strange. Okay, but you try, but you don't know. Maybe the Lord had that at an appointed time for them to hold the business card. And John's giving me the thumbs up because he knows that they're going to read, on our business card. It says, right, we left the business card there, and it's quoted, Romans 10:17 is there. Faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of God, right? So maybe they read that and said, what is this, a Bible verse? Let me open. You don't know what happened. You don't know what happened. So now, here it comes. Just hold your question just 1 second. What information about our station and ministry can I share? Now, here comes your time to answer your question, Scott. We start talking about where, by the way, this is a two-sided thing. There's a second side. Because I'd rather carry around 30 sheets of paper than 60. Plus, I'm using Ron's copy machine. I don't want to, use up all his paper. What information about our station ministry can I share? And then you're going to get into the whole thing. Who, the station, who owns and operates it? Obviously, it's Calvary Chapel. Fill in the blank. Your church, the format, the teaching. I mean, this is all the stuff that now this is your chance. But notice how many questions on here are about them, and how many questions here are about us. It's only one. And you could go into some detail, and here you go. The station's format, the power, the range in miles. You got to be upfront about this stuff. I mean, who the target audience is? Is it Bible-believing Christians? And maybe it's some of the unchurched, whatever your language is that you use. And this is important. The mission is to educate the audience and teach the Bible. And educate. We all have what's called NCE licenses, non-commercial educational licenses. And it's true. We should always remember that we are educating, we are teaching, we're Bible teaching. So you are educating, and you are teaching the Bible. And most importantly, you mentioned how the money paid for underwriting is a donation to the station, which leads to the last question: what level of monthly support are you considering? And you find out what their budget is, and as I said earlier, instead of giving them that list, it's like buying widgets. Well, I'd like 10 at $15, and I'll take 3 at, it's not an order form. This is not a transactional business. This is not, sir, would you like fries with that? That's a transactional, this is a relationship that you're building. So, what are they considering for their support? You find out what their budget is rather than assuming they won't or can't. Well, they won't do more than 100. Well, did you ask them? And I believe people, and this is not to be like trying to get as much money out of them. That's not what this is. But some people have it on their heart that they want to support the radio station at $250 a month. And why should we say, okay, well, your limit is $100? Why should you do that? You have a question?
Rob, I have a question. So we don't have very many sponsors, but we just got a new sponsor, Liberty Health Share. Okay, do you have them?
Yeah.
Okay, so they contacted us.
I know.
In that situation, would you just automatically, which we did, we said it's $750 a month. We didn't ask them,
right,
what's your budget?
Right.
So on that kind of client, you would have done the same thing?
Good question. So that gets back to the packages thing. Preset packages, when they're used and not used. Predetermined rates for ad agencies is what my answer is to that. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going back to the first page here. When are preset packages used and not used? They're not used in the situation we're talking about where it's $100 is the lowest. They are used in that situation. I got a call from an agency that does a lot of car dealerships. But what did they call about? They called about, it was a play on Broadway. I forgot which one it was. It was a big one. It wasn't. It was a Christian play that was doing a short run, but they were treating it like a buy. Right. And they said, "Well, what's your rates?" I said, "Well, what's the budget for this?" They go, "What's your rates?" I said, "Well, what's your budget?" It's like a game. You're playing a shell game with them. And they said, "You don't know what your rates are?" I said, "Well, I know what my rates are." I said, we're going to not accept anything less than, it's like $15 or something. And they said, "Why so low?" I said, "Do you realize what you're calling?" Because they're used to hearing, anywhere from $1,000 a minute. And so I said, well, I don't know. I said, make it $100 a spot. You have to come up with some kind of number. And they're like, $100? Why so low? So now you're just throwing numbers out. That never happened because they didn't see the value in it because I didn't quote a ridiculous number. I'm not going to quote a ridiculous number, but I will tell you, Luis Palau came to town for City Fest, and I will share that was several $1,000s, more than $10,000. So you will see that. And that's just because we have Salem in the market, and Salem was quoting them something around $50,000 to go on the air. So they said, well, our budget is, over 10. And I said, well, we can do that. And they almost fell off the table. You're going to put us on the bridge because the value for them, who they're going to reach, is a very different level of sponsorship versus a local store. Or, I'm honest with you, that the guys you're dealing with, they try to get it for the lowest rate. They try to get all kinds of stuff in there. They do this. They negotiate constantly. That's what they do.
But my point was,
It's good what you did.
okay, so that's my point for those that are
Right.
listening. And when you get that kind of person, and that doesn't happen very often,
No, it doesn't.
especially in LPFM,
No.
that someone is actually calling you in a bigger organization like that, or be it MetaShare,
Right.
or Samaritan's Ministry.
Right.
I mean, I love that we're getting that money each month.
Sure.
But for us, it was like, well, that was our already top tier.
That's fine.
So we just said, that's the number. And
Right.
we'll give you that number. So is it important?
It's important to have a number. I mean, I don't. This goes back to my days, even in secular radio. You don't do the discrimination thing. Well, they have more money, so I'm going to raise the rate, kind of thing. You have to be honest, because word gets out. If your thing gets circulated that it's $750 and they see that and they paid more than that, it just
Well,
it doesn't
and that was my
reflect well.
point. Because we
doesn't
had
reflect well.
already set numbers,
it.
and that was the top
That's
tier.
your number. You're in.
That was
You did the right thing.
It wasn't like, oh, your
No.
Liberty Health Share, it's $1,500.
Correct. You can't do that.
Okay.
You can't. There's a lot of reasons why you can't do that.
What I'm
It's not
getting
right to do.
What I'm getting to
Right.
is because when you're saying, hey, what's your budget? But it's also good to have over here in case this other client comes and you need to have a definite
Correct.
number,
Correct.
right?
Which gets to the point. I think this gentleman had a question here, and I will. It gets into Plan B, what you're talking about.
So a couple things that we're doing that have worked well
Right.
is when I meet with a client, I have a portable radio that works really good, and I check it in the parking lot that the signal's coming in clear, and I sit at their desk, and I turn on our station, and I say, this is our station right here. Look at it. It's coming in really clear. But I always check it right before, And so that works well. Another thing, we have a lot of small ministries and small businesses. So I always have my hook, and it is, man, you can be on the radio as cheap as $1 a commercial. And they're like, wow, I can afford that, our budget. And then it builds because it's $1 for 10 seconds. And you got to be on at least every day. And then they're like, well, I want to be on 3 or 4 times. So then by the time, and then I got to do a 30-second or a 60-second because I can't squeeze it all in. That can be $300-400. But it's that $1 a commercial that hooks them because they're like, I can afford it. And sometimes if they can't make it because it's a Christian ministry, we'll even lower costs because we see the value in helping them because they're helping the community.
That's the only. Yeah, I would be careful calling it a commercial. And what starts happening with that is you start getting into. You're starting to get into the transactional thing now, which is we really stay away from that. It's more about it becomes the widget thing. I'd like to buy this many erasers for 25 cents, 5 of the green, 5 of the red. Oh, well, you want the bigger ones? Well, they're 35 cents. You're starting to get into more of an order form. And it says right here, I'm getting into that right now. It says Plan B. If no budget is given, then you need to give the rates. So there are times you're going to have to give the rates. The MetaShare example is that. You give your rates. I would not go lower than $10. I mean, you could do $1 if you want. I wouldn't go lower than $10. I really wouldn't. You're going to say, well, you guys are really big. In our market, $10 is nothing. We're not really, it's not big.
Is that per spot?
Per spot, yeah.
Spot, okay.
Yeah, you
Not
just,
per month.
it's $10 is, I would not go lower than $10. I just wouldn't. Here's why. This costs a lot. Your equipment costs a lot. If you have internet connections, you have tower rent, you have it costs a lot to do this, legal fees, and you got to put the thing together. I mean, just a lot of time. Is it, giving it away for $1? And at the end, is that really $1 when they're done? How much is you're telling me it's $30, so. Right.
So now you're $6, and we have a rule you have to be on every day.
Right.
So $6 times 30 days, that's $180 just starting.
I'd rather just tell them it's $180 and put them on. I mean, it's a lot of. I mean, it's great if it works for you. Go ahead. Like I said earlier, there's no wrong or right answers. If that's working, fine. I just don't. I like to.
It's on a rate card.
Sure. Right. If that's working for you, that's great. I think there's some more stuff. Yes.
Yeah, this is kind of going back a bit.
That's okay.
You said something about the cold calling.
Yep.
And obviously you want to meet up with them.
Right.
In my business, like what I do now, like for my job for construction, I talk to a lot of clients that basically say, well, you got me on the phone, and they want to know then and now.
Oh, sure.
They don't want. I don't have time to meet up with you. I'm very busy. You know, can you give me a price right now? Tell me what I get. That type of stuff.
You get that. I mean,
do you see that?
we get that sometimes, and sometimes when you get that, I say to them, well, you're changing lives. What is that worth to you? You have to ask that question. And if they say, I don't know, you say, well, did you have a budget in mind? And usually you get an answer. Well, what do you mean? Like how much a week, how much a month? Yeah, well, how much, you want to support the radio station. What were you thinking? Well, I can't do any more than 500. So, telling them, well, our minimum thing starts at $100. Okay, click. You got $100.
Right.
I use the expression you're leaving money on the table as a business, from the business side of it. The ministry side of it is you're not giving them a chance to bless where they feel, because many times when they come on at $100, they call us back and say, oh, can we do it for 400? I didn't feel right about that. So offering that level was not working. It just wasn't working. So again, yes, they want to know. Some people will ask. I always say, you can tell them, you give it to them, $100 a month, $500 a month. 10 to 50 airings. We're going to bonus you. I have it right here. Late nights, overnights. You just, sometimes you have to tell them. It's case by case. You have to have the answer ready to go. You do. Or you could say, what are you looking for? I'll do, I'll think, I'll come up with some stuff and I'll call you back. And it's, it becomes very transactional. Somebody like that, you have to remember, they're making an investment in the ministry. They're making an investment in the lives of the radio station. Something like that, my experience has been, it's very transactional, meaning just give me the number, what it is. It's usually short-lived. It's usually very short-lived. Somebody like that doesn't want to spend time with you is, sometimes you have to say no. I've also found the guys who pay the least, the smallest ones, involve the most amount of work. They are just, the music's too loud behind the thing. I didn't like the music. She says that her S is funny. I just still drive. Oh, I want to change one word. Oh no, I want to change it back. It's like, what's this guy paying? It's not worth it. At the end, you're chasing after, someone else that hands over, they said, oh, just gratefully give this, and you never hear from them. Those are, so that's the other thing too. You have to be careful of that.
First of all, Rob, I want to speak to his remarks. A 60-second underwriting spot is probably not a good idea.
That's not.
That's
right.
That's a no-no, because it's a commercial. The whole idea is to acknowledge a donation,
right.
And the guidelines are 30 seconds is pretty much what they will allow. Now, if somebody complains, you're going to that's somebody will have to complain most likely, but
So legally we can't. I didn't know. Legally
yeah.
we can't do more than 30.
You shouldn't.
You shouldn't. It's not
Shouldn't
good
go over 30.
practice. It's not good
Plus,
practice.
you're cluttering up. We're supposed to be non-commercial. We're not supposed to be playing commercials.
Sure.
And let me tell you what, the audience, even though there's sponsorships, they perceive anything that's not normal programming, a promo for the radio station, and I've seen this in the audience research. I've sat in these focus groups for 1,000 years. It's a commercial. For full disclosure, I was hired by Sirius Satellite Radio in 2000 when I was one of the first 20 people hired, the first group of 20. We did the focus groups, and we had in between the music. These are the music channels. We ran, the 60s, the best from the Beatles to the Beach Boys. They said, we thought you guys didn't have any commercials. All it said was the 60s, the best from the Beatles to the Beach Boys. They said, those are commercials. I'm like, no, they're promos. They didn't understand. So anything that promotes the radio station or something that's going on, what is in the listener's mind is a commercial.
Which is almost every single pastor that we're playing.
Correct.
Because they ask for money at the end.
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
So-
I don't want to.
Yeah.
Before we get too far along,
Yeah.
so what level of sponsorship? That's where we want to go. What kind of right? But then you said $10 a spot basically.
I wouldn't go any lower than 10.
But I mean, so if somebody comes in and they want to do $1,000 a month, how many
Right.
spots are you running for them?
You probably would increase. I wouldn't give them a $10 rate.
Okay.
You make the rate higher, otherwise you'll have no time to schedule anything.
So
you have to remember in this format, okay? What's that?
What would be the most you run somebody?
Four times a day. Yeah, four times during prime time, meaning daytime, overnights. You run them too. The biggest challenge we have in this whole format that we have, Josh, is that. Somebody thought it was a great idea to make these shows 26 minutes, Josh. You inherited it. And times have changed. And I'll be upfront with you, that 4 minutes, It's tough. I mean, you got 26 minutes of programming, and you got 4 minutes to connect with that local community. It's tough. It's very tough. And, there's situations where our communications director will come in, and they want to do local announcements for the school or for the church, or whatever's going on, and they want to do something for the women's ministry, and they want a full 60 seconds, and I go, I don't have the time. It just doesn't, and that's because of the sponsorship. Remember, these sponsorships are 18 seconds. We run 2, sometimes 3. So that's not taking up a full minute. I got to put a weather in there. I got an announcer that comes on. Sometimes I got news. You got the sponsorship, and if there's something else going on, there's just not enough. There's no more room at the end. That's the only thing I got to tell you. I don't have enough room because Josh has to have them go for 26 minutes.
I'm grateful for that, by the way, because I don't have sponsorships. I play music in between. So.
Okay, but you know what? That's an opportunity to connect with the audience, because if you're just the radio station becomes a pass through. The one suggestion that I was very happy that Pastor Lloyd made is he said, cut the music at the end. And quite honestly, I know that you want to time out the shows and you do a wonderful job, but we sit there and that thing's dragging on with some theme music for 45 seconds. Guess what happens?
Yeah.
Bye-bye. And we do a nice gradual fade. It's nice. You would be very proud, Josh. But the day I sat there, and the day I sat in the office, and Pastor Lloyd said to me, cut that music at the end. They used to do it to me at WMCA all the time. And I said, he's right. I go, we were starting to cut. And we cut. I don't know if you know that now. Have you heard it? Oh, and it's great because I gain back time to do things. Because now the women's ministry wants to do something, right? You want to promote something going on at the church. Why should I bump that? Because the music that Josh so nicely timed out for 45 seconds is eating up my 4 minutes.
Okay.
So I love it when you run short. I love it when the shows run short because then I got that music and it's... We don't run short. You do on my station.
I was asked to stand up. Until 6 years ago, I owned a car dealership. Mm-hmm. Everyone's an expert in advertising. No one's an expert in advertising. We had a budget. I spent it every year. So when people called to sell advertising, I wasn't looking for places to spend advertising.
Right.
When they called, when they sent a letter, if they did not, this is for cold calls. Yep. If they did not say they were going to call me back, it went in the trash. If it was a secular advertiser and they said they were going to call me back, it went in the trash. If it was a Christian-based ministry and they said they were going to call me back, I put it in my file. I held it, and I hope they didn't call me back. If they did call me back, which was a low percentage, I didn't like it because I knew I would have to sit down with these people because you don't have time to sit down with the people. Right. My point is this: if you're going to make cold calls, call Christian businesses, introduce yourself with a letter, tell them you'll call them back, get an appointment, and sit down and talk and work the ministry aspect, because that's the angle that is hard for a Christian businessman to walk away from.
I agree. What we do is we make sure that to get into these cold calls that you were asking about earlier, is we make sure that we know who they are beforehand. It's much easier, and LinkedIn is fantastic. If you want to get in to see a business, and whether they're Christian or not, if you can do it through LinkedIn, who do you know that knows them, who knows you, to make that introduction for you. And we have someone working for us full time that we pay. We don't pay him commission. There's no commission because it's donations, but that's what he does. And him and I are constantly, who do we know, who do we know? And it's who do I know? He'll call me. I'm trying to get in over here. Do you know anybody? Yeah, I do. If I ask him, do you know somebody? And it's all about the network of who do you know. Most of the time it's through ministry. You find out who's who. It's a very small network. I mean, that's true. Yes, sir. Hey, Rocco.
Hi. We talked about the statement of faith earlier.
Yes.
How do you go about turning down either a sponsor or an event or even a radio show that you do not want on there, even if they're willing to sign that statement of faith?
Absolutely. So we have a review committee, and it does really exist. And Pastor Lloyd has appointed someone in our case that does that. We do it sometimes ourselves. It doesn't even get to that point, and we say we subjected this to review, and honestly, we don't think it's a good fit. It doesn't match up our ministry. We're very nice and kind about it. We just say probably not a good fit for what we do. We've never had a problem. You just have to say no sometimes. Just say we reviewed this and we're part of, we're very picky. And like I said, occasionally something will slip through. It's kind of odd, but we do our best not to have that happen. Yes, Bill. This is going to be. I don't use Unix, Bill. I use Windows. And we have the Windows updates turned off. And we do pay ASCAP and BMI.
I just have one question. I want to know if Lloyd is going to put you in charge of the church offering also.
Bill, after this, if I still have a job, I'm doing great. Let me tell you, it's tough when you have your boss sitting in the back of the room over there, you know. He must be, you know, he just looks at you, don't know what he's thinking, you know. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so are we good on the budget? Oh, good. Yeah, please.
Do you ever do any time for products, like this company donates this in return for time? Do you guys do any of that?
Trade. Yeah, trade. The only thing we do occasionally is the company that we have someone that works with us that does T-shirts and we give out a lot of frisbees, which are just great. You know, I don't want to get into some of the other stuff you guys are going to talk about. Unfortunately, it's all related, so it's kind of you have to touch on that table. You have to touch on it all. Kind of. Well, we give away a lot of frisbees. If you ever want a great item to give away, it's called the flying ring, which is a frisbee with a circle. It's open. Put your station logo and number on this thing, and just when you go to street fairs or wherever you go, just give these things out. They're great. And because we do such a large quantity of them, not only we get a good price, we do some amount of trade with the advertising specialty company where we're not paying cash and we're giving them airtime. In that case, we do turn the rate up a little bit. We do rack rate, which is not going to be $10 a spot. You'll never get through it. If you have a $200 order and you're doing $10 a spot, it's 20 freebies you're giving away. So we do, but it's usually with somebody that we're doing something with. We have some pizza places that are on the air. If we order lunch for the radio station, we might get a discount. So we'll work it out. We'll throw, we'll bonus them. It's never 100%. It's always a bonus, but we'll put it on paper. It gets back to that question earlier. Is there an agreement? So yes, there is trade, but it's very selective. Do we really need it? It's a last resort. But we look, is the cash outlay worth it? Can we put these people on overnight? Will they accept that as the bonus? Yeah, we will. We're good. We never try to do anything malicious. It's my fault is that I'm too honest about it, but I'm going to do that. I'd rather account for every penny. I'd rather account for everything that we do. And I always say, all the stuff's on my desk. All the folders are there. If I get run over by a bus, you guys come here. You can look at the computer. I don't have anything to hide. So in that case, if we're doing something, yeah, we did trade with them. Absolutely did. And this is how much the lunch costs, and this is how much we gave them. It's better to have it in writing. So it's limited. If that answers your question. Yes,
couple of things. You've got an underwriting person on the street.
Yeah.
Doing this, and you're paying them a straight salary,
Absolutely.
not a commission.
No commission.
Okay, all right.
Never.
That's interesting.
Because it's donations.
Okay.
You can't pay commission on
that. That's not a good thing. Okay.
And for full disclosure, he came from another radio network, a Christian network, where he did this position there.
Okay.
So he came in with he jumped right in.
Okay.
You
two more things. Well, I got a million things, but two real quick.
Sure.
So aggressive marketers. Your experience has been somebody who's really an aggressive marketer a lot of times isn't a good fit for you because they're just looking at ROI?
Absolutely. We get a lot of inquiries from mortgage companies. It's one of the big ones.
Okay.
And a lot of these guys are just sharks. And they'll reorganize their mortgage company under a Christian title. Oh. And they'll send a spot over it, and there's a disclaimer at the end that it's a bigger company. They do an LLC, and I call it, that's not for us. It's just not for us. The challenge we have is Salem's in our market, and Salem will sell them a half an hour. And you listen to these guys, and they're just, they're questionable. And you tell them there's no ROI, and they're like, well, I'm on WMCA, and I get this many leads. I'm like, there's no leads, guy. You didn't listen to our radio station. And that's okay. I'm like, it's not going to be okay. You're not going to be happy. So we just say no, thank you. Yeah. Because they're not. And I'm going to tell you, I go through the file. I've looked in the past before I worked there, and you'll see they ran for 2 weeks. They paid a ridiculous amount of money, and you see the notes in there. They pulled because they weren't happy. I said, you guys tried this back in 2012. You weren't happy. Oh, you know about that. I mean, come on, guys. Let's be honest. Tell the truth,
A slightly different spin
Sure.
here. Teaching programs. A scenario has come up where somebody wants one or more businesses want to underwrite a teaching program. Do you do that? How do you do that?
Sure.
How many spots do you give? What's your scenario with that?
Usually you put it next to the teaching program.
Okay.
Yeah, that's rare, but we have that. We have someone who's an anonymous donor. We know who they are, but they want, you want to talk about convoluted? So let's just call business A that they own. I think it's like a machine shop, so it's a business-to-business thing. So unless you and I had a need to do mill work or machine work, you wouldn't even use these guys. But they own a machine shop. They want a sponsorship to run for, I forgot what it's for. It was a pregnancy center or something like that. But they wanted to appear next to the show. They want it all done anonymously. They have it set up. So yeah, we do it.
So now I've got like potential for 3 sponsors to present a program, and I'm trying to figure out. My thinking is I'm just going to give them a billboard. It's made possible in part by so, and then give them a bonus spot later in the day or something like that. Work out of a deal.
Yeah, absolutely, you do that.
Okay, so
and we also have local ministries to answer that question. Is local ministries that come on? I say ministries, teaching programs from churches. A lot of them, Josh edits them, so it's local Bible churches that are having an event going on. And they call us, and they're very gracious. I mean, they are spending a good amount of money with us every month. And they say, hey, we're having whatever it is, having on a harvest or whatever. We have a budget of a couple $100. Can we? And you say to them, listen, guys, what do you want to do? Well, we just wanted to air at the end of our show. And Josh already produced the show, so it's too far out. I said, what do you want done? They send you the copy. It's like 4 lines, and we record it. We stick it on the end of the show. How much is that? You just don't. You don't. It's just you don't. That creates let me tell you something. You bonus that. You run that little 10-second thing behind the end of their program. They love it. When that board comes up to vote on if they're going to renew that show for the following year, and they tell me every time, that's because you ran the thing for Harvest for whatever time. We ran it for a week. We aired the thing 5 times for 50 seconds. For 50 seconds worth of airtime, we got them renewed because you guys partner with us. There's that word again. That's what this is about. It's not how much we're going to get from each other. It's really how do you work together with them. So yeah, I would say do it. Yeah. I just want to get through some of this stuff real quick. All right, and then we keep going with the questions. So that's the rate thing. Rate's tough. I mean, it's money. I understand that. Let's talk about ratings and potential reach. This is kind of important. A lot of you have asked me about ratings. So let's talk about this a little bit because this is a very this subject of ratings can go all over the place. So I'm going to give you my take on it and then the textbook answer as well. First of all, the textbook answer for simple reasons is typically you're not going to have ratings because of the size of the station. You're just not going to show up. Okay, and we have that in some cases, and some of our stations have a difficult time showing up in the ratings. The other thing is the cost of ratings. So let's talk about cost of ratings. There's an organization called RRC. RRC, Radio Research Consortium, is based in Maryland, right near Arbitron's old headquarters. And what they do is they sell ratings to non-commercial stations. Most of their work is for public radio. And I'm just going to say, as a Christian radio station or a Christian broadcaster, never snub your nose at the public radio guys. I'm just going to tell you, even if their politics are different than ours, which I think has changed in recent years because the government has really cut their funding. So when they were I'll just say it, very Democratic friendly, they're not as they used to be in their reporting. But the reason why you should pay attention to what they do is they've really plowed the way for us in a lot of things with technical or with ratings. So this RRC came out of public radio. And then they got smart and they said, who is the other list of broadcasters that are not commercial like public radio? And it's what they call religious broadcasters. That's us. So in that are the big Christian stations like your KSBJ from Houston, your Z88.3 in Orlando is on that list. Anyone that's non-commercial will be on that list. WCSG in Grand Rapids, they look at that as music stations. The next one down the list is what we do. So we've purchased ratings from RRC. I will tell you it's very difficult for them to do the calculations for us, and without getting into a whole ratings thing, we are in what's called 2 different markets. If you just want to know, one's called a diary, the other one is PPM. PPM is electronic rating where participants wear a pager and they measure it electronically, and that's New York. diaries, people write down what they listen to. We are in all the zones. So whenever, it's called a blended book. So when you get into Monmouth and Ocean County, where we are, Monmouth County is on the PPM electronic, Ocean County's in the diary. So when you want RRC to do some kind of ratings for us, it's tough. They have to really do a crazy calculation. And I have to talk them through it every time. But what we found is that of the ratings that we saw, we did, because of the changes, we did see it triple in the mornings, which is huge. It's a huge, triple your ratings just doesn't happen. People say, well, this is not all about ratings. That's a very commercial radio approach. We're supposed to be serving the Lord. We look at it as it's really souls for Christ. These are people that you're reaching with the gospel. So it's good to have a measurement with ratings, but really you're not going to have, don't go crazy trying to get ratings for your station. If you're in a bigger market, you might be able to get something. If it doesn't show up, it doesn't show up. Don't go crazy with this. Instead of ratings, you talk about potential reach, because this conversation will come up with some of the sponsors. They're going to ask, who listens? How many people do you have? So we always talk about potential reach. And potential reach is usually a calculation that's determined through the signal coverage. In other words, you got that circle, and I'll use whether it's Bill or Bob Moore or whoever your engineer is, Rob Branch. They draw that circle. They look at the population. This is how many people we can reach. So you always talk about potential. What's your potential audience? That's the only number you can really give. Our potential audience is ridiculous as compared to our ratings. Our ratings look very low, and it's very hard to quote ratings to advertisers, that's the word I'm going to use, that are looking for ratings. You're not buying ratings, you're buying potential. So that's again, you're going to get asked that question. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quickly is the underwriting regulations. And Scott, this is the one line I promised I'd talk about. Underwriting regulations for NEC, non-commercial and low-power FM. I have it here, and this is the only thing I'm going to touch on. No comparative or quantitative descriptions. Okay, Scott, you mind if I just touched on this for a split second? Okay, because I know this is his session. I don't want to take away from it. So we can't say something's better or best, period. Okay, so now remember, advertising, it's all about better or best. Okay, they can't put any price information. So the big yearly sales save 25%. A new Honda now is $99 lease. Can't put it in there. Ain't happening. There's no price information. No calls to action. Hurry, sale ends soon. Stop by today. Come by their 5 locations. Can't say it. No call to action, okay? No inducements to buy, sell, rent, or lease. So now think about this. You have to write a spot for someone, and you can't put any of that stuff in there. And by the way, I copied and pasted that. That's right off the FCC rules. So we go back to our earlier, remember we're building on this presentation? It's not advertising. It's not return on investment. It's support. And let me tell you something. When you start getting down the road and you have that, people have the selective hearing thing. They totally forget this. It's not advertising. Well, you're writing my spot and you're not going to put in that, we have the best pizza in the Northeast, and I can't put that. Well, what about our pizza special? Monday nights, we do 2 for $10. Can't do it. Well, what good is this? I told you. Well, how are you anybody to come into the pizza place? So were you listening or you're just nodding? You don't say this, but it's like rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Know what you're getting. I know you're laughing. It's like, but this is real.
Going back to the potential listeners, what contours do you use? 60, 40?
Usually, it's a good question. Usually depends. See, what looks better? What looks better? I think, what is an average radio, what is it going to pick up? I always go by the little radio you talk about. If you buy, I call it the lowest end radio. You go to Walmart and you buy that Emerson radio or that Sony radio for $15, is it going to pick up the radio station? Can somebody get it on a clock radio? Look at you, you need a lot of signal to power that, so you want to maybe do it inside the 40 or inside the 60. Depends. It's a good question. I'd probably do inside the 60. You don't want to lie. You really don't want to stretch the truth. There's no stretching the truth here. It's the truth is the truth. I mean, that's what we stand for. So example, beautiful Harley Davidson light trucks. We can't say that. What do you mean? They're great. No, can't say it. I picked a really odd example purposely. Let's talk about your question that you asked earlier, which is the next one. Underwriting spot production, who produces the spot? Are you covering any of this at all? All right. Well, you could do it in-house. You can do it in-house, which means you do it yourself. You find people who can read copy well, all right? Or you use a service. We use a service. And our service costs us $100 a month. And it's supposed to be for 10 spots, but we have a good arrangement with the guy. There's another service that we have. They charge $11 a spot. and he'll redo it as many times as you want. If you want music, it's $13. So at the end of the month, I get a very, very small bill, but I'm churning out tons of copy and production. And we write it, they do it. And I could talk to you guys after who that is if you want to know who they are. I don't want to give a plug for them. But one is Christian, the other one has Christians working on staff, if that's important to you. But it's important to us who does it. So we send our stuff out. And I'm going to tell you, it makes a world of difference, because usually what these people are, who they are doing this, are people that actually do this at a higher rate, and they're reading this copy for very top stuff, and they're making a couple extra dollars, and they're doing a good thing for the Lord, so they'll do it for whatever it is. It's maybe whatever they're getting paid, a very small rate. But when you get your spots back, it sounds great. This is one of the keys to making your radio station sound great. There was, without getting into too much detail, there was a theory, and I'm going to say this very carefully, that the sponsors should be on their spots, meaning that you'll get to hear yourself and everybody will recognize your voice. I totally disagree with that, unless it's a very unusual situation where you put the sponsor on the spot. When I joined the organization, 98% of our spots had sponsors on. And I'm going to tell you what, in my opinion, aesthetically, in my ear, the entire radio station sounded like a college project. You had all kinds of crazy voices on the air, and unfortunately, these sponsors were sold that concept of you can be on your own, guess what? Commercial. Okay? And if that's what it takes to get you on the radio station, I don't want you supporting her. It's not about you, it's about the lives that are changed. Remember, same thing over and over. So you have to redirect. And some of them got upset when we said, "We're not doing this." And when I use the analogy, if somebody wants to be on their own spot, here's what I tell them. So you like to barbecue in your backyard, right? Oh, I'm really good at barbecuing. Yeah, you like to flip those burgers. Somebody asks you a question. Do you go in the Red Robin and say, "Excuse me, I want to go back there and cook my own hamburger because I'm really good at it"? No, you let the professional guy that cooks burgers all day cook your dinner, correct? That's different. No, it's not. We're professional radio people. We're professional announcers. We got the guys that do this professionally. Let me give you a copy. If you don't like it, we'll get somebody else to do it, period. You want it to sound great or not? So you have to really re-educate people, but don't let them, don't let the tail wag the dog, as I like to say. It's not about the sponsorship. It's about the, I don't know where John is. Right here. He has a question. Thank you. All right, okay.
This is just a comment.
Yes, sir.
Just a comment. I'm personally fortunate that I'm connected with some folks that I trade favors with to do that. So I get it for nothing.
Right. That's great.
And I don't do this all the time. We've got more underwriters now, thankfully, that we had initially. But for me, the intention was I try to use women as much as possible, because I got guys teaching all day long, and it's male voices. And so if I've got underwriting spots, if it's client appropriate, sometimes you know what I mean? So I just want to encourage, use female voices.
Absolutely.
Just to make it
absolutely
for the sound of the station, and the more the variety you can provide, the better it's going to be.
And the one thing I'll say is, some people set up at home with their little home microphone, and that thing is not broadcast quality. And we've had a couple of those come through, and I go, And you have to remember, just like Ron has, he has the audio processing in the back room, and if you haven't seen it, he uses an Optimod. We use Omnia, and we use Omnia 11s. So we're competing with what's on in New York, and that's what we use. When you stick one of those garbage microphones through our stuff, and we were using something called an Ariane in front of that, which does multiband leveling, and then it goes through, it sounds like garbage. It just turns to mush on the air. It has to be, and this goes back to what Josh was talking about, the pre-processing of the voice. The guys who do this professionally have a mic processor or a channel strip on that mic, so the level's coming through at a decent chunk, then it hits our leveler, it doesn't do much to it, and then when it hits the processing, it just jumps out of the speakers. And we used to have to sit there sometimes and monkey with this thing in production. I said, enough. I said, it has to stop. I don't have time to go in there and fix equalization on people's mics. So we just said to those people, you're not doing it anymore. We can't. Or they're popping their P's and, all the stuff that you were talking about yesterday, take very seriously. If you're going to do this stuff in-house, it's got to be great quality. It makes a difference. And if it starts off sounding poor, it's not going to translate well. So that's kind of important. Uh-oh, John Sims.
What's the shelf life on a typical underwriting announcement? How long?
Oh, gee. That's an excellent question, John. Wow. This goes back to the 26-minute programs. They don't air as often as you think. You have to remember, while there are some people who are shut-ins and have the station on all day, and those are some of our best listeners, by the way, because if a transmitter goes out somewhere, they call us before the automatic thing goes off, and some of them do make pretty big donations to the station. For the most part, we will keep it for about 6 months. About 6 months. But for when it starts sounding old to us, it doesn't sound old to the listeners. You know, we're running a thing for New York City that's coming soon. And New York City is going to be on the air very soon. And it was suggested to me it's time to freshen that up. And I said, that's really interesting. I said, because I really don't think we've played it that often that people have heard it. And we just went through the financials. And they said, your donations to New York City are shooting through the roof. What's going on? Then, you know, word is out that you guys are coming on soon. I said, no, it's not out, because purposely you're just saying it's coming soon, because in case there's a technical glitch, I don't want to make a promise we can't keep. I mean, it's going to go on, but I don't want to give a date just yet. We're in production right now we're going to put a date on it very soon. But what's happening is people have heard it so many times that now they're reacting to it. So when we think it's getting old, it's not old yet. I just have the bottom here of resources. If you want to go to the Radio Advertising Bureau, the radio channel, there's a lot of stuff there where you can learn about different types of businesses. If you're going to go into a furniture store, it's good to know about furniture. So some of that stuff is locked down. You have to pay for it. As a non-commercial station, I think they do it for $100 a month. And then there's Radio Sales Cafe. If you're really into sales and just learning about technique with sales and radio, there's a lot of fun stuff on there. Again, this doesn't all apply to us. You know, it's applying to commercial radio. But I think it's a lot of fun to pick and choose, you know, when you hear ideas about stuff. And I think the audio processing is a great example. What do the other radio stations in town use? We want to sound just as loud. What do the other stations in town do when they're doing sponsorship? We want to sound just as professional. Did you have a question? Yes. Yes, a question.
You can just repeat it.
Sure. I'm done, so I'll just take questions.
We're not nearly as packed in our schedule
Right.
as you guys are, but when you get spots, I mean, do you have a limit of how many you'll do back to back to back?
Yes, yes. They're purposely done. They're between 13 and 18 seconds because we do 3 to 4. And what we do is, and I want to share this, just, and I don't want to get too much into the production, but in our case, it opens up with a billboard. Teaming with you, we're grateful to the following sponsors. It's a very short thing. It runs for about 3 or 4 seconds, and it has a very low music bed behind it. And I just want to caution you, I don't want to get into this big production thing. We run the music beds very, very low. It's been my experience with the audio processors, it just pulls that level up, and it's going to compete. We run them ridiculously low. So there's a very low music bed. And then each one of the sponsors that are on these 18-second deals, we run music beds very, very low for 2 reasons. Not only technically because it brings it up, but also because as they change, the music changes behind them, so it keeps the momentum moving. To your ear, it sounds like something changes, but it's not distracting. That stuff is going to be offbeat because you're not going to get those 18 seconds to match. So what originally was done, we were going to produce these things with 3 and 3 and just call them pods. The automation cycles them out. And I'm going to tell you what, it sounds great on the air because you're keeping that music low enough that it sounds like something's changing. It keeps the radio station moving, but it's not distracting around that the music has changed and there's something going on. And at the end, there's teaming with you type of thing. That runs at the end. It's very short.
Thanks, Rob.
You bet.
Thank you, Rob. If you have more questions, we have a break. You have a 20-minute break. You can ask Rob, get all the information you want. Thank you, Rob. I think
You
that's
bet.
probably the most important session we've had. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so 20 minutes, and then we have 2 workshops. The interference with your signal is not happening, and so Scott is going to be in here doing writing copy, and Josh will be in the back doing voice tracking. So 3:30. Thank you.